purpose of the podcast is for facilitators, especially beginner facilitators. But we wanted to put it together to, I suppose, um, give advice, give tips, help them get a bit of an idea of the path of a more experienced facilitator for the ones that have been doing it for a longer period of time. Because there's a lot of new people that we see kind of coming into facilitating, and um, outside of John, you're not going to hear anything about it. So we thought it'd be cool to go and do podcasts with different facilitators around the world that are really taking it seriously and building a business with it, or learning heavily into it, or have really kind of delved deep into it, and then get their experience of it and how they got into it, and then yeah, provide the opportunity for people to kind of see where it can take them as facilitators, I suppose.
Okay.
Jean-Paul, so we usually start off with a common question, how did you end up with the method? But before we jump into that, Andy and I were just talking about astrology and sometimes some of the eerie accuracies that pop up with it. I know how much you dive into so much learning of array of different modalities and schools of thought and
Mm.
everything. So what are your thoughts about astrology and those signs, and then with the work? Do you use any of it? What do you think about it?
I don't use astrology. I've read about it. I've looked it up. There are some strange patterns that seems to be there, but I find that a lot of it is more of our way of assigning meaning and the way that astrology is being communicated. We know as we work with the Demartini method with John is that basically every behavior under the sun we demonstrated at some point in time. And so if I tell you that, oh, it seems that, you know, as so and so, you tend to do this. Well, your mind will tend to look that up and confirm that because we have a confirmation bias that goes. And so it can be useful to identify patterns of preferences because there are things you seem to resonate more with or not. But I noticed that whenever I read through the different astrology and tried to look at it as a map of my personality or a map of elements, I, being more scientific, I tend to evaluate it to 70%, 80% accurate. And I'm not even talking the horoscope part of it. I'm talking about the personality dynamic part of that. And whether it was Chinese astrology or Western astrology, Vedic astrology, there are these patterns that come in the way it is being communicated that you'll connect with and resonate with. So for me, I find it more of a tool of projection than something that defines you. That because you are this son, you're going to be like this, and this is how you're going to act, this is how you're going to behave. Similar, for instance, when I was looking at enneagrams and the different numbers and different qualities that were provided within that, when you dig back really into the earlier form, the more spiritual version of the enneagram, they said that the numbers that you're navigating about, so enneagram maps human behaviors and human personalities into 9 different groups. And there is a drawing that seems to suggest how you evolve from one number to the next. Like if you're a number 5, these are the behavior that will help you evolve. Well, the earlier version of the Enneagram, they were saying that these numbers are actually your blocks. It's a fixation point. You got fixated to that, which stops you from evolving. And so the journey is to unfix that so that you can travel the entire scheme of the Enneagram and integrate all of it. That's not how most people will use astrology or personality type at first. Now, if you look at the star mapping that they use, it's interesting of the assigned meaning that they provided, but when you add astronomy next to it, you realize that if you put a 3D model of space and where these stars are that matches, the Gemini, the different, or Taurus or Virgo, you'll realize that it's not that flat. There's actual depth in the way the stars are being created and mapped into that. And they've evolved over time. So when they created the map of the sign, it's actually not as accurate to the map that we have today. With the Earth precession and all that, those have shifted. So is it really the sign? No. But in terms of a system of meaning that we assign, that's sure. So it's not so much the star themselves, but what is the meaning that you put to it? And so what I like to observe is more what kind of pattern of dynamic that astrology would suggest. So it's not about telling you what you are or how you behave, and this is you and this is not you. It's more, there are patterns that are described in it. And so for me, astrology, I used it really, and I considered it more of a personality type model than a tool to predict future and predict timing, even though I know other people would use it that way. And when I look at it through that lens, then I see the pattern that astrology would suggest that human behavior has. And I think that is valuable. The compatibility dynamics that they put forth in personality type of all kinds, and astrology included, there's this notion that there's a behavior that you demonstrate when you feel normal, your everyday you. And there's how do you behave when you're stressed, and how do you behave when you're panicking, and how do you behave when you're relaxed, and how do you behave when you're intimate. And if you look at any personality models out there deep enough, they always tell you, well, you are of this type when you're normal. When you're stressed out, you move to this other type in the model, and so on and so forth. You change your pattern based on that. And so astrology can be useful to uncover some of these human behavioral maps. And that can be valuable there, so that you'd see, okay, normal, that tends to be like this. When I'm more relaxed, I tend to behave this way. These are the other things that comes out. When I'm being intimate, emotionally intimate, being vulnerable with someone, these are the other behaviors that will demonstrate, and so on. When I'm stressing out, when I'm panicking.
Yeah,
and
it's like
so
that.
on that part, astrology does have a certain appeal to it. But don't type yourself in. Using it to say, this is who I am, this is the way I am, take me as I am. Like, no, because that's still an external description of you.
Jean-Paul, I think me and Dom have both met you online for the first time, but we met you in John's programs. I'd love to hear about, how did you first get involved in the Demartini world and the Demartini
Okay.
method, and how did you come across it, and what led you here initially?
So the way I came to it was very interesting. I first got exposed to the Breakthrough Experience book in 2007.
Paperback?
Paperback.
Cool.
It was like in a whole bunch of books that I had bought, and Breakthrough Experience was one of them. And so I read it. It was then called the Quantum Collapse Process. And I tried it, and it didn't work for me.
It didn't work.
No, it didn't work. When I was reading it and tried to apply, the questions on that, I didn't get a result. And, I said, well, I like the ideas that were being shared. There were some of the pieces that were very interesting, but tried the process, didn't work out. So, closed the book, put it aside. And in 2016, I've been in relationship with a friend of mine named David for about 2 years by then. And he was an American coming back to Paris. We met through Toastmasters. And for whatever reason, he decided that I was someone valuable, and he insisted that we stayed in touch. And so we did. We started having conversation, we started sharing ideas, and we realized that, yeah, we do love ideas. And in 2016, I don't know how and where, we came to speak about the book, The Breakthrough Experience by John Demartini, and said, oh, and he said, I know the guy. I met him 10, 15 years ago and been doing programs with him. And he went to John's first prophecy. That's how early he was in that world. And said, oh, cool. And I said, hey, well, can you explain me a little bit more, about this method and all of that? Because I tried it, didn't seem to be working. Did I do something off and all of that? And unlike him, where he was very open in sharing, the tools and his experience, on this one, he was zip silent. He said, you got to go and meet him. He said, you can't just talk and share just one tip just to try and move forward. Said, no, you got to go and see him. And he said, well, okay. I trusted him enough. So I started looking online where John went and what he would be doing. And I discovered that he was in London the next year in May. And so May 2017, I went there and did my first breakthrough experience. And when I went there, I realized why he told me, you have to go there. Because all I did through the work was the intellectual work of it. But I didn't have the experiential experience of understanding what was being asked.
Just going to answer, what was that first breakthrough experience like for you, Jean-Paul? A lot of people have different experiences of it. Some people have a great insight and then they want to learn more. Other people attend it and they don't really have any kind of shift, but then they're curious. Other people break through something massive and then they go down a certain path. But what was that first breakthrough experience like for you?
It was very interesting because the first part, all the knowledge that is being shared, that fed my mind like crazy. Like I was devouring everything that was being mentioned there because, I live in the world of ideas, and these are ideas and these are pieces of concept that in my mind has existed, but were not really connected together. And I couldn't tie them together. And through John's approach, his way of bringing these balances from one world to the next and staggering them next to each other, it suddenly started piecing that invisible glue that I was missing to tie all my ideas back together for my own world, and really contributed to that very, very strongly. So I got that first, in-depth admiration and wow factor of, wow, he's really knowledgeable. And a lot of the information he was sharing, it were pieces of information I already knew, but not tied in the way that he was tying them together. That became extremely valuable for the first part. Then, come to the practical application of the Demartini method. Pick the person you hate the most or you resent the most to work on. And so I did. I picked my dad. In that time was not a dad, but I picked the person that donated a seed for me to be born. That was how ingrained the hatred I had for my father before I started that process. And like many, you list down the downside, side B. I basically had one line side A, and most of them came in side B. So I said, all right, let's pick that. And I went through the resistance, There's no way in hell did I do any of that that we was doing. Not a chance. But the facilitator on my line kept me in check and had a presence in him to hold space. So much so that I could feel it. And kind of like quieted me down. And his presence helped me quiet the emotional volatility to hear the answers that were coming up that my mind, because of what I chose to believe in, denied and did not want to see. It took a little while, but he stayed there long enough for me to get those first answers and to realize, okay, that's the case. And when he was not able to do that, I went to John and I asked John, and John's questions who helped me identify that, oh, that behavior of my dad stealing, what is my way of doing that? And I was looking at, physical objects and couldn't balance that. But he said, go to the other one. Have you stole time before? Did you make a promise that you not commit? And were you taking something away from them at that? And as we added up, I started connecting all those dots. And by the end of the process, after 15 years of absolute hatred and denial of the existence of my dad, for the first time, and I haven't seen him in not that well, I saw him. And I saw him in front of me, and I could say, thank you, my love. And catharsis. And that was really powerful to experience that. But damn, was it painful to go through.
How long did it take you?
I got there at 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was 3 traits, side B. And I had to uncover 2 traits, side A, because I only had 1. So I did pull off. And through their presence, I was able to find out through my facilitator, Dr. Kim Yabs, got to pull out the other 2 B side A's that I did not want to see that was there, and was able to integrate that. And so that's when I understood why it did not work when I was just reading the book. Because I was lacking the presence, the intuitive presence. I was only being cognitive in my answers. Another way to say it, I was imagining the benefits. I was not actually recognizing the actual benefits.
Okay, so some facilitators that are listening could be working the method at home by themselves, writing it down, and feeling like they're not having as strong as a breakthrough that they have had at the breakthrough experience, or with the facilitator. Does the presence and holding space come into that?
It does. Because that's why we ask, well, that's why John asked to go to the moment. And are you there? Because that's how you replicate present as best as you can. I was clearly highly polarized to my dad. That's why I needed an external presence to quiet me down. It's this idea that once you go beyond that ratio of perception, you don't have intuitive access to the balance. It's not that it is not there, it's that that voice is drowned out and you cannot hear it. It is there, it's whispering at all times, but you just cannot hear it. There's too much brain noise at that point. The pride, the judgments are there, just too loud. And so the presence come in. That's where the external support is. There's a second thing that happens is there's a priming effect that happens when you get such a strong experience for the first time. that you try and expect or assume that the next one will be replicating the same intensity. It's not meant to be. Some of my other work is like just a quiet tear that comes out, just that heartfelt feeling, a little shake in the system, and that's it. And some others is just tear jerking, bawling, and, sweating all the water out of your body, basically. And so there's the clearing of how it should look like. And because we have a first experience, and usually it's very intense because John chooses someone you resent a lot, so that, it anchors that experience in your system. Some facilitators will assume you need that same intensity every single time. It's not the case. Like for that's why we also have the list, of all the different criterias of what a heart open looks like. Because sometimes I get people who they don't get the tear. They get all the other symptoms, like 9 of them, but the tears. But me, in my resonance to where they are, I get the tear. So I know they hit that point. And when you do the extra validation, can you thank it? Do you feel the need to apologize? Do you feel there's anything to forgive? The answer is no, no. I can thank it, nothing to apologize, nothing to change. It's perfect. And that's why there's more. The tear is one of the most intense ones that we use. And yeah, if it can happen, it happens. If it doesn't, that's okay. Don't force yourself on. And it really came to me to acknowledge that when we were doing the extra training. I don't know if you remember, there was a time where the Institute added extra training for facilitators, before you go back to the breakthrough. And Tanya was running it. There were other master facilitators doing that and demonstrating some of these techniques within that. And it was very humbling because in my mind, I had created this idea that you needed to get that heart open. It's a necessary piece and it's supposed to be really fast. And then I got the opportunity to watch Tanya struggle to find, a trait, to find that balance, ask questions and guide person not being able to find it. And we're talking about 2 facilitators who know the method and know them well. And they were struggling through until they reached that point. They got there. And it was humbling to me because to me to pretend that with my little experience, I can do better than a master facilitator in that, said, okay. It gave me a relaxation point. And so sometimes, when you're learning the method, when you go through that, we set up this imagination, this fast fantasy of how it would look like and how I would be doing it, how effective I'm going to be. When it is about being present with the person in front of you and see if they're even a match for you. I can't work with everybody. I can't facilitate everyone. I am more resident with certain type of people than others. But when I'm starting out, I don't know who they are. So I work with different people and see, oh, these ones, it's easier to work with them. I like these problems. These one, oh, I really struggled on that. And where did that come from? And that's where I realized that part of my struggle was because I was projecting into that. So one of my habits, though, when I'm meeting someone for the first time and I onboard them, I'll judge them. I'll Demartini them before I start jumping really into the facilitation work with them.
So will you have clients where you meet them, you get the judgments, you own the traits of those potential clients, and then
Yeah.
still they may not be a client for me.
They may not be the client for me.
Okay. So it's not just feedback, oh, there's more I need to own. Some clients just aren't for you.
Yeah, some clients are not just for me.
Okay. I think that's really
They're not
helpful.
meant to be. And you'll hear that, once you hit that intuitive point, when you own everything, you'll realize that, because part of it is to stop wanting to change them. Part of my owning them is to realize that there are benefits for them being exactly the way they are. That even working with me for 6 months and there is no change at all, nothing changed. They're stuck exactly the same place. What's the benefit to them and to me? Because that dissolved it, and that dissolved my savior complex when I was starting out, where I was trying to save the world and not really serving them, and stop trying that and to say, okay, I'm not going to change you, but I'm going to make space for you to transform yourself.
Can you speak on the distinction between change and transform in the language you just used?
Yeah. Change has the assumption that there's something bad, wrong, or negative. That's why you want to change it. You're not recognizing its use, you're not recognizing its purpose. When you recognize the use and the purpose, you don't want to change it anymore. And when you don't want to change it, you're not resisting it, so it doesn't persist. You make space within you and around you for a transformation to happen. That's where your vision, your inspiration, your mission comes in, because that's what you're bringing forth. That's what you're breathing life into. So now you can transform.
This is Jean-Paul understanding why you're doing the behavior, or why the client's doing the behavior, and appreciating that. And then when you do, you're then able to have a transformation if that's the next step.
Exactly. And you'll realize that, because then they'll reveal more of their vision. They'll connect it to their purpose, like whichever component you can pull out and help them, reveal to themselves. Now you see, is what you're currently doing compatible with what you're seeking or not? Because if it is, don't change it. You're on the right path. You're not recognizing that you're already on the right path. Working with my clients, what I realized today is that you cannot be off your path. You can be very slow on it, you can be very quick on it, but you cannot step out of your own path of why you came to this world and where you're going. But your story on top of that can make you think you're not on the path. You're not recognizing. And so when, those little moments where you through that, okay, there's nothing to change here, then you've learned your lesson. What is that lesson for? What's the transformation? Is it to continue what you're already doing? Or is there really a transformation to do that you would love to do? There's no neediness anymore at that point.
Will you work
You
with
can
clients?
be. Yep.
Will you work with clients before, if say they come with something they really want to shift as a prerequisite, you work in the way what you're speaking about right now to get to the point where they're not impulsively trying to change it before you feel you can truly dissolve it?
No, I try to uncover, because I don't want to project into them, even though I do have my own hidden agendas when I'm working with clients. It's my way of facilitating and creating. What is more important to me is for them to be aware of what they are asking. You say you want that. Okay, why do you want that? What's that for? And and this is a different way of asking for the benefits of it, but I'm not in the method yet. So you want this change. What do you want that for? And in that, without them knowing it, they're revealing to me their entire map. This is what they're fantasizing about. This is their nightmare. This is what they're running towards. This is what they believe in. That they're revealing all of that to me. And based on where they are, I'm feeding it back to them. And I'm checking, is that really what you want? Right here, right now. For me, my hidden agenda is your full awareness. Be very aware of your hidden intentions. And then from there, okay, if you want, like, which way now, kind of as a coach, not just a facilitator, but as a coach, the most important thing that I can do with someone is get them to a decision point. Like, I'm not going to do the actions for you, but I can guide you through, question that, get you to get a game plan to a point where you make the decision. Do I go there or not? Do I do this or not? So before going into a transformation like this, is there even a reason for you to really change that? Or are you trying to change that because somebody told you to, and it's not inspiring or motivating for you?
What do you find in that questioning process most commonly? Is it an injected value from someone they're looking up to, and then when you ask that question, they then consider it and think, or maybe not? Or do you find most of the time that they're really wanting a change at a deep level? Or what do you find is the most common when you go through that process with people?
Some people don't want that deep change. It's not the right time for them, or they actually don't want it. Their attachment is stronger for them. And for me, I'm not interested in fighting that. I'm here to help you transform, and I'm here to help people who are ready to transform. That's what I mean, that I'm not here to change you. You're aware of your attachment. I help you become aware of that attachment. Are you satisfied with it? Are you happy with the result that you're getting? Are you okay continuing this way? Or now you have the information, do you want to transform that? And some of them will say, no, actually, I think I'll keep it this way. And some will say, yeah, I do want to transform that.
Jean-Paul, before when you said you're never off track, and that's absolutely beautiful, and there's so much in that. How do
Yeah.
you incorporate or help someone understand working from your higher values, and then when you're doing lower values, but no matter what you do, you're on track?
If you want to understand that, is even when you're working in your lower values, the action that you choose to express in your lower values, if you do it, is an expression of your higher values. Let's say a person says, okay, they're doing something clearly of low value to them. Okay. I'm doing my Excel spreadsheet at work. It's like, I'm not inspired by it. It's boring and all of that. Great. No, I don't like it. I don't feel inspired. It's not like, I don't get energized by it. It's draining. Great. But you're actually doing it.
Hmm.
You're actually doing it. So what are you really doing it for? And when you dig underneath that, that's where the higher values shows up. I'm doing it for my family. I mean, I'm doing this Excel work. It's annoying, it's boring, but it pays well and can take care of my kids. And that's where I find joy. That's where I find my love. But because they're comparing that work to this fantasy ideal they have, they don't realize that they're doing something of high value in a frame of lower value because they're doing it. Because something that is really of low value to you, you don't do it. Because there's the reverse. There's the, I should be doing that and I'm not doing it. And I should be doing that and I do it. So if I should do that and I do it, you're actually expressing a higher value, but you're drowned under an injected value. And that injected value hides the higher value being expressed. In the case of this Excel, I should be spending more time with my children. But I'm here doing an Excel spreadsheet. But then when you dig underneath it, the ability to contribute, the financial contribution that this is a part of, was what's more important. And if you dig underneath it, it is for family. It's just being indirect. It's not him being able to be there, playing with his son and coaching his son in that manner. But indirectly, he's still contributing to his son, his children, because he realizes, yeah, like I can pay for his soccer games. I can pay for his toys. I can pay for experiences that we can do together. This Excel spreadsheet I'm working on is contributing to that. And sometimes the linking process, at least in my experience, is that it's not so much creating new connections, it's revealing connections that are hidden because you are already doing it.
When you said the linking
But if
process,
you said I should, yeah, from
so
the
so
value.
yeah, when you say linking, are you talking about linking an action that they want to do that they're not doing, or you're talking about linking in a different context?
It's you're doing it. So this is the case where you should be doing something. I should be with my kids, but I'm spending this time doing my Excel spreadsheet. When you go through the linking process of looking for the benefits to my highest value, it's going to reveal you because you're already doing it.
Yeah, I got you.
Because you have motor action doing that. It's important to you somewhere. That's why you're doing it. But then when you have the other part where you said you should be doing it, but you're not doing it, you're procrastinating, hesitating, just putting it off, frustrating yourself. That because that thing is not valuable to you. You don't see the links. That's where the linking is about creating meaning and creating connections. Because always come back, remember that what people do, what they actually do or don't do is the expression of their higher values. So if you're doing something, but you're feeling drained, is because between what you're doing and a narrative you layer on top of that, a perception you put on top of that is off from each other. That offness is what creates the stresses, the burnout, and all of that. But if you're doing it, you can reveal what the link actually are to your highest value, and usually you calm the system down. That's why often the key question is, are you doing it or not? And that's why I noticed that we're not off track. We can be slow, very slow, or we can be very fast, but we're not off track. I had a client who was complaining about them not spending enough time, getting a job, finding a job, and all of that. But then when we start digging, their highest value is on something completely different. And when you're not searching your job, when you're not doing that, what are you actually doing? And when you have that awareness, then you can do the Demartini method on any resentment or components around that. In this case, self-resentment. And that's what I mean, that I know for me, going through and realizing that everything that we do is aligned, this idea that there's no mistake there. Well, if there is no mistake, I cannot be off my path. So if I cannot be off my path, then this journey that I think is off my path, that is not on it, what is it really about? And sometimes you'll realize that that little seeming detour you got was to grab a skill, to anchor an experience that makes you stronger for what's coming for you. I don't know if you guys have heard, Steve Jobs' commencement speech. And in that speech that he shared, very beautiful one, he speaks about connecting the dots, and that you can't connect the dots looking forward, but you can connect the dots looking back. And that's what we're talking about here is you were never off path. In the moment you think you're not there, you're doing things that seems haphazardly random. But in hindsight, and with the Demartini method to help you accelerate that awareness, you suddenly see the trajectory and you realize you were never off path.
Just a lack of awareness of why you're doing the actions.
Yeah. That's why for me, a lot of this is more a journey of recognition more than anything else. At least for the healing of your path part. Is recognizing yourself, is recognizing me, is recognizing your client. What are you really doing? Not what you think you're doing. And that's the beauty of the method.
John Paul, I'm curious, you were talking at the start about how you came into the breakthrough experience, and you were saying, well, the Saturday morning was very interesting. What's your background before you came into the method for you to be able to understand? Because all of those concepts are very, can be complex for a lot of people.
So before that, because of my initial pain when I was 13, 14 years old, I had cut off my emotional side. So my mind went into overdrive to compensate for it. And as my mind went to overdrive to compensate for it, my mind tried to make sense of what was emotionally happening for me. And so I went to all this psychological research. I went into the personal development, the philosophy, going into Tony Robbins' work, for instance. That was one that really got me very deeply. And I was, crafting in my own mind all sorts of models to try to understand what's happening in me and how people are, working around and doing things. And why are they behaving the way they behave? Because it did not make logical sense for me. And I was trying to get that, but I could not. It just could not fit. And there were two experiences before coming to the Demartini Method that really helped with that. One was I had an EMDR, which is eye motion desensitization and reprocessing therapeutic sessions, where I reconnected to my emotions for the first time. And so during my younger self, my reaction to that painful experience really drove me this idea, and that was my young self interpreting the intensity of my emotions then, is that if I allowed myself to feel all that completely, I would die. And if I die, I could not protect my mom. I could not protect my family, my brother. That would not be possible. So feeling not okay. But in that EMDR, because I was looking, just trying to understand this new concept. So my goal, I found one not far, so I gave it a try. We went back to that experience and she got me to process it, to actually feel the emotion through. And when I felt it through and reached the end, that was when I recovered and realized that I actually can't feel my emotion till the very end, and I'm still alive. And when I got that experience, suddenly a lot of the concept that I've been reading about human behavior started to make sense. Because I was using a wrong set of axioms to map human behavior. I was using logic, true, false, and pure utilitarianism as a way to map the world, and most people don't act that way. When I suddenly took on the axiom that emotions were much more powerful drivers for people, suddenly all those maps that I could not fully understand before started making sense. Human beings tend to be more emotional than rational at first. So that was one of them. Another one was when I got introduced to the work by Byron Katie. As I tell the story, I was walking up the bookstore and I went into the psychology section. And among all the books that were there, as I usually went, I opened this book and read a paragraph in it, and I started bawling within the bookstore. I started crying. Closed the book, walked away immediately. I'm a guy. Don't cry. But then as I reached the staircase going down, like a part of me just yanked me back and said, wait a minute. You've been reading tons of books. You don't cry, but you cried here. There's something for you in this book. Took the book, brought it home, read it through, learned her approach in it. And I said, okay, let me try. It's been 5 years that I've been single at that point in time. I said, well, let's see, no harm trying. Let's test it. And I did. I walked through her process. And in that process came out a very deeply ingrained belief, which was, you are not a human being if you're not with a woman. My immediate reaction was anger. Like, it's been 10 years that I've been doing personal development. How the heck can I still have such a limiting belief?
I don't think it's silence. I think it's frozen.
I said, okay, I agree to that. That's true. I did not do work on that. So I did. I discovered that that was a saying of my mom, a very particular moment where she was so angry at my dad that she said, your dad is nothing without me. And as a young kid of 14 years old, I internalized that. And my phrasing of that is, I'm nothing without. A woman. I don't exist with that one. I cleared that story. I cleared that narrative within me. Two weeks later, I met someone. It's been more than 15 years now. We're still together and we have two kids together because of that belief. And there was no seduction technique. It was just spontaneous coming out of that.
The way you cleared it at the time, was that similar to how you would dissolve something with the approach you have now?
No, but it ingrained something in me. It ingrained the idea that it doesn't take much if you know exactly where to hit. And so even when I'm using the Demartini method, there's the method, there's the process. And actually most column for most people are actually relatively easy to work through, relatively simple if they're not resisting it. For most people, most adults, we're resisting that. So when you're working with someone who's resisting it, it's very difficult to get through. You're not getting answers. And I've been there before where I could sit 8 hours with the method, try to work on someone and not budge because there is something else happening. And so being more intentional in the exploration of where they are, the dynamic that is in place, the resistance that are in place. When I started, I would jump right into the method with the clients. We've identified, the challenge that you want. We identify the obstacle stems from this problem in your past. Let's go do it. Now I add this little layer before that is I'm testing and checking your capability of even processing it and how quickly you can process that. Because if not, I'll be beating my head against the wall and they too. And be both frustrating for them and for myself. But I knew that there's that element. Where is it? And so a lot of it became into the way I would navigate around. You said, all right, this is a challenge that you're facing it today, right? Okay, confirm. When is the earliest experience of that happening? That pattern. Like you describe me here what's happening to you. I help you extract a pattern there. When's the earliest version of that pattern, or when's the most intense one that you have? And sometimes it comes back to childhood. Sometimes it goes back to one point in their time where they made a decision to traumatize themselves intensely. I try to find like John says, when is the highest charge? When is the earliest moment?
You do both.
I do both. If I can, I like to go to the earliest one. But usually if someone has decided to traumatize themselves in between, that one tends to overshadow and hide the other one. Which one goes first doesn't really matter. At the end, you're doing both anyway. But I always find when I go back to the earliest one or one of those most intense, it dissolves every other charges along the way because every other charges that they're facing on the same behavior or trait is a re-experiencing and recreation of that an original experience. Now, you can't always access that. Some people have unconscious blocks, so they can't go that way. So you work your way back as best as you can. That's why I talk about the earliest remembrance. But once you're tackling the earliest remembrance, they can jump back further back. Like I remembered I was working on on abundance, on the concept of abundance with a lady, and we were jumping back. We were working at a particular moment where she felt that things were taken away from her. There was no abundance there, and we're discharging it. And suddenly, in the middle, she started speaking incoherently. There's something out, like if she was not in that moment. And suddenly, I realized that she started, revealing a little bit. She had jumped back to the moment she was born. In that moment of moving from warmth to cold, she considered she had created a traumatic response then. She created the idea that her mom was rejecting her. And so no matter all the clearance of abundance later on, she's still constantly rejecting herself. Since she was still subordinating to her mom, she was pushing herself away. And through that rejection, you don't have abundance. And when we clear that original perception of your mom rejecting you and said, who are all the people welcoming you, and do a 6 and 13 in that moment, where the doctors, the nurses, the parents, and all the other people welcoming her into the world, that shifted all the other events that were abundance related. Because she did not perceive herself to be rejected anymore. Something can hop back really that further back. And as much as I can assume, and I think John is really good at that because he's done so many of them, he could jump straight to that. I don't have that experience to be able to say that's exactly where you have to go right off the bat. But what I am certain of, my client's mind wants to go back there. And in my questioning, those moments will pop up and we can hop our way back to that moment and clear those.
What was
You're
some of
saying
the... You go ahead.
you go, Dom.
Well, I'm about to jump to something
Oh,
else.
okay. So I was just going to say, so John, your perception is that, or you've seen moments where John's jumped straight into that moment? Can
Yeah,
you
because he has enough
elaborate on that?
experience to do that.
Okay, so you've seen where he's been working with a client and they've said something obviously, and then he's then had the discernment to go, you need to go to this moment,
Yeah,
whereas your perception is, I wouldn't know to go to this moment, but you've seen it in him.
yeah. I've seen John do that where you're saying something and you're resisting something, and suddenly he seems to ask a question out of the blue and hit the mark. It's exactly where to go. But for me, from outside, I could not see the logic of that jump.
Okay.
Now, is it an intuitive component that got to him to do that? Part of intuition, one of the form of intuition is pattern recognition. So he's done enough to know the pattern, to know, let's just go right there. Let's skip, the intermediate step. But for me, I don't have that capability because I don't have the same patterning skill that he has for that. But the different patterning skill is I do understand that the person in front of me will reveal that idea that that's why we have this overreaction that happens to some stimulus, because in that moment you're seeing a pattern in the world, you sense it in the world, and your subconscious just throws up all the memories that matches that pattern so that you can balance those. And by pulling all of those up, among those is that earliest moment. That's why we overreact. So there's this hidden dynamic within us that try to bring that to the surface, try to get us back to full awareness. And so I take advantage of that. The person has that answer, will reveal it.
You said the
And
person
so
has a
part of
desire
my
to find an
certainty in my,
answer.
yeah, and part of my certainty as a facilitator comes from there. I know the
Yeah.
questions and I'm certain they know the answer. They just might not be conscious of it, but the answer is in them.
What are some of the experiences you had with clients or yourself that gave you such a strong sense of certainty and unwavering belief that they have the answer and they can transform if that's what's to happen?
The first for me was applying the method to the mundane. That was a huge reveal to me because the idea is universal. And obviously, when we're working with clients, we're working on heavy charges. But one of the experiment I did was, what if I tried it on mundane perception? Things that are neutral, but I did make a judgment. I did have a perception, but like I'm not really charged about it. And I did it on things that are really mundane. Okay, the wall is white. 13 on the wall, like 6 and 13 on the wall is white. Where's the black? In like 5-10 seconds, gets, it's not charged, so it's very quick. Like almost instantly, I get all the black up and then poof, a tear comes out. Wait a minute. A tear comes out on something mundane. Something that is not important. And I could get to a point where I have tears and suddenly even the label white and black disappears and I experience love. It anchored to me the idea of how universal it is. I understand, working with those larger charges that we have, those hatred, those resentment and all that, it takes work, it takes that. And it takes longer to build certainty on that. I get it. Because the certainty is not about the answer, it's the certainty can we navigate through with our clients to get there. It's navigating through the resistances. In knowing, okay, which column do we work on this time? Like, where are they? Like, where is their attention? Is there attention on the block? Is there attention on finding the answer? Are they listening to the intuitive answers that they're having, or are they still answering from her previous world maps? So part of my certainty grew out of that. That was part one. Part two is indeed, I've done other work before, so I did have a certain understanding. And I know that, for instance, the principle of the mirror, I had learned that through Byron Katie. She teaches that in the work. That's where I learned the concept of the simultaneous mirror, where when I perceive you doing something and I judge you for doing that, the moment I'm judging you, I'm doing exactly the same thing. That's a simultaneous mirror. That's from Byron Katie's work. But the fact that I could do it on these mundane little things of daily life that are neutral, that's where I started getting started. That's the first part of it. A second part is, and sometimes, I tried it on with some clients to explore a mundane moment like waking up in the morning. Like, is there anything more mundane and boring than just waking up? And he was sharing, he's waking up with some challenges, and like a lot of people, they would wake up, they're not fully inspired, but they're resisting and squirming in bed, having a hard time getting up, and said, well, let's have a look. And when we started digging underneath that and looking for benefits of why he's creating that resistance for himself, it turned out that for that client, that resistance was his way of proving to himself that he deserved to exist. That's the meaning, the unconscious meaning that he had assigned behind that behavior, that resistance that he's creating. That because he's resisting waking up and he's waking up, all right, I deserve to exist. And then he can follow through the day. But like you said, why would I Demartini waking up? Like it's so mundane. Well, when I started working with some of these mundane and seeing like all these like big, major beliefs coming up, I said, yeah, they do have an answer underneath it. It's just how do you get them to be aware of it? That built my certainty that first, the method worked, and the certainty that they have those answers. Now, my way of doing now, this is where I went through two experiences within that, because this is more of my early experiment and saying, well, no, I have these coaching methods that are behind me. I got NLP training and all these other things. I've been in the world of personal development enough that I can probably figure out, maybe not everything, not all the subtlety, but enough to apply the approach and do that. So in 2017, before doing the Demartini Method training, I tried the grief process, the way that we learn on breakthrough, on someone. I was not selling it. I was just, asking to experiment. And boy, was I in a ride. Because, John says, grief, 5, 10, trade action or inaction, and usually take, 2, 3 hours. So I said, I'm not as good as that. Probably it's going to take me twice that time. It's going to take me 6 hours to get through this, potentially this thing. And so I had a friend, he was going through grieved the loss of his girlfriend. It's been 5 years. So I said, let's try. I asked him, do you want to try that? And he said, okay. I told him, I'm not guaranteeing anything. This is experiment. I'm not hiding the fact that I'm learning it, but maybe it can help you alleviate that a little. We worked on 46 traits to grieve. It took 16 hours to get through.
One sitting?
2 sittings. 2 8-hour. And boy, I can assure you, in the middle, I was saying, am I screwing up? Because the thing is, he was dissolving traits. No, but like there are constantly new traits popping up over and over again. And I even asked facilitator to say, okay, there's something amiss here. In between those two, there's something amiss. John said it doesn't take that much, but like I'm really having a struggle finishing this piece here. But we actually did. And then later on, when I look back, I realized that I was not dealing with just grief. I was dealing with an addiction at the same time, woven together. But the trust in the method is what allowed me to carry through. There was a part of me that said, I'll get to the end. I don't know how. So I didn't make a commitment on time or anything. I said, we're just going to walk through. So they did not know. I didn't set up any expectation on them. I had set it up for me, but I didn't tell them that. I said, I just tried this and, we'll go for however long now. It took 16 hours, but he did make it. Like the heart open and all of that was beautiful. And that was my first grief. But at the end of that, I can guarantee you, I had no doubt I'm going to get through till the end if I choose to go there and they're willing to engage with me until the end. We'll get to the end. And what I realized is that, yep.
Continue what you were saying. I'll ask after.
Yeah. My realization is to not set Even though the Demartini method is clearly relatively way faster than a lot of other methodologies, I don't impose a time frame on my facilitation with someone. I don't say, all right, you got this trait, so it's going to take us, 10 minutes or 20 minutes because it's variable.
So with your
And I
clients?
remember, yeah, it's variable by client and within clients between traits. Some traits goes faster, some traits goes longer based on how attached they are to the trait or action.
So you'll package things differently then.
I will work on the attachment before I work on the trait.
Do you set hours, 90 minutes, or that doesn't apply to when you're working with clients?
And I do have a timing of the session and the time that we're going to work together. But I don't say that, okay, we're going to dissolve this trait in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That I don't put there. So for some of them, it's going to take 5 minutes. Some of them is going to take 3 hours. That's their attachment. Usually it takes longer. I know there are other things woven around. So I'm going to try to see if I can work the attachment that goes around, the resistance. For me, that's part of what I observe is if you're present, we've noticed that. If you're present, the answer comes immediately. 6 and 17 is a demonstration of that. Your intuition will reveal to you that very, very quickly. And it actually, I observe that to be true in most columns. But when the answer does not come immediately, then there's a hidden agenda, there's a resistance, there is something blinding us to the answers.
Yeah, so with that process, if you're working with clients and as you're going through it, it's almost like it keeps changing and you're not working on a particular line. Will you try to bring them back and do the line, or will you follow down the rabbit hole?
I will follow the rabbit hole, but I'll make sure that all the columns are clear. That is, once I've cleared, if I'm going down a rabbit hole that gets me to a second trait, okay, then I know that I'm tracking 2 different traits. 2 trait action or inaction. And then, all right, we're finishing. Okay, I finished this column here. And then I start testing all the other columns. But I do make sure that all of them are done.
Okay.
Unless I'm doing a one-off, which is very rare, I prefer completeness to just result. And that's my preferences. It's very dependent on clients and all of that. But I do make sure that I get through all because I'm tracking their attention and I'm guiding their attention. So when their attention is following my guidance and we're sticking to a column, and sometimes their attention pops to something else. And when their attention pops to something else, I ask them to reveal that to me, that they just jump to something else. And then together we assess, is that just, a random piece? Let's throw it out, let's come back to work on this, or it is something that is being revealed intuitively that's blocking the balancing of the other one. But then I will come back to all. When I was beginning, I went through it methodically, one after the other, column by column. Today, the only one I default to is the mirror. That one I get through early with everybody to own that. Because I found that if you don't own it, you can't recognize it. So it's hard. If you don't recognize you're doing it, you don't see benefits or drawbacks as much. So owning the trait is one that, I make sure all my clients go through.
Okay, great. So that's in almost 6 and 13, you do the mirror. That's what you're talking about.
No, not even in 6 and 13. It's when they're talking about a particular trait that they're going for, instead of jumping, straight to benefits or going to column 14 and all that, I usually get them to own that first
Okay.
because I notice it makes all the others a lot easier.
Do you do the simultaneous or you just do the standard 2 and 9?
Standard 2 and 9 first. Simultaneous is way more advanced. It applies within 6 and 13, but it's not the Demartini method. But
Jean-Paul,
I've observed that. Yep.
let's say it's 2017, you've just completed breakthrough experience and perhaps the Demartini method training, whether that year or whenever you did it.
Mm.
And that Jean-Paul has access to you to mentor him, and he is wanting to master this method and facilitating people. What would you, how would you guide him now?
What I noticed is I wouldn't guide him differently. I would just reinforce what he's already doing, which is to explore and try. Repetition is important. Because a lot of my confidence and a lot of the confidence I built came from that. It's doing it. Doing it myself, doing it with others for free early on before, integrating it with other things. And what I mean by integrating it is not merging it with other modalities. It's mean that I use the Demartini method within the coaching framework that I use with people. It's part of the journey.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's about doing your reps. That's where the confidence comes.
And
I
what about
came in with that understanding that there's an intuitive component to it. And even though John, speaks about it cognitively, we can get lost in that and forget all these more hidden components in it that are hidden within its question. So when you can bring that to consciousness, it helps. Like, I did this exercise going through every single question. Well, they're not, for me, they're not really question because for me, a question ends with a question mark. And, each column that we have, it's not one question, it's multiple questions that goes in there. So for me, these are multiple small processes you go through. But I did go through and mark like for every sentence and every word that he was putting on there, what was the expected outcome in my client? What was supposed to be shifted in them just by saying that? You said, go to the moment. What are we really trying to do there? What's the hidden intention behind that? Oh, it's to get them to be present, to embody that past experience. They're not remembering, they're embodying it right now. Okay, getting them to live the present moment. Then you go on to the next part of the question. What are you expecting there? And you create your own personal map of what those pieces are, which helps you guide and navigate when the person is moving slightly off the path that you're inviting them to. You can get them back to that.
it sounds like language itself is really important to you, Jean-Paul.
Yes, it is.
Why
Actually, and go ahead, finish your question first, and I'll share the story.
okay. I want to know what you see in words, whether it's the love or the importance and significance, because I feel like you're seeing a meaning and almost something else. When you see words and what words mean to you, it seems like they mean so much more to me, and I want to know more about that.
Yeah. Words are labels that we use that are attached to a concept that you hold. We can use exactly the same label, the same word, and the three of us would understand three completely different things. And it's when I'm working with someone, it's important for me to understand what that label is pointing towards. Let me give you an example. Imagine a car. Okay, so Andy, you have a car. Dom, you have a car. What brand is your car, Andy?
Ford.
Okay, what brand is your car, Dom?
And Maserati.
Okay, I had a BMW in my mind.
They're nice.
I'm talking about a car. I never said what brand it is, but you all created one with one brand. And if I extend behind that, Andy, behind the Ford, you have associations you've created to that. Just like Dom, behind the Maserati that came up, you have concept you tied to that you have emotions attached to it. The definition of the word, like the dictionary definition, doesn't really matter. What is your definition? Like, what did you tie behind that label? Because what we're dissolving is the concept behind it. It's not even the word. Now, that's why I'm very specific when I'm defining a trait, action, or inaction, because it's not the word. I'm not trying to get a precise definition. I'm trying to find labels that my client use that matches the charge. And so I divorce myself from my meaning of the words to try to get the meaning that you have. Because that's the word that you're going to use. It's like a pointer. Language points. Language does shape. We can use language to create, but in the Demartini method, the language that people use points towards the charge. But the charge is a physical reaction you have in your body. That's where the charge is. That's where you feel the charge. So not only are they creating their reality, they're using labels that point towards these charges. So the more specific I am, the easier it is to clear. Because if not, I'm projecting my definition into you, and it doesn't make sense to you.
Okay, so
See, we're using the example of the car. Yep, go ahead.
like, well, what I'm hearing is that their charges are creating their reality, not the language. Like the charge is the more
Both. The
fundamental.
association you have between the label and the chart creates your emotional, your reality. For sure. Because you're creating a concept, a cognition, and that cognition through the mind-body connection, it gets represented in your body. That's when you embody that. So words are really, really important. And I remembered in that first breakthrough, at some point, and this is really what got me totally sucked into this world. Because, I came to the breakthrough just to understand a book. That was my original intention of going to the breakthrough. And I don't remember if it's on Saturday or Sunday, but John mentioned how people who uses the expression always and never tends to either already have or are, the way I paraphrase is, preparing their body to receive cancer. And I remember when I heard that, I mean, you can hear diseases in language. And I said, I want that. I absolutely want that skill. If I can hear that, I want that. And so that's how I got sucked in, because to learn that, it was in Prophecy 2. And to get to Prophecy 2, you have to go through Prophecy 1. So I went through Prophecy 1 to get to 2. And it didn't happen in 2017. Lucky enough, it came in, I think it was 2018. So I got a chance to go and do that. Because that's how important language is for me. Language shapes both the way you think and shapes your experience of life. It shapes what's possible and not possible. It's not about what is, but it's what I create on top of that. Like I go as far to explore the logic of languages. You know, how, for instance, English, I usually say that English is very movie-like, whereas in French is very painting-like. Because in English, most of our description revolves around verbs. So there's a constant motion when you're speaking English. In French is a language based dominantly on the nouns and the adjectives. So it's much more static. You need to describe the picture, then you get it to move. So yeah, language is very important to me, and specific word can just hit at the right place. You can, like, even when you're prompting them, if you're using words that are resonant with them, you get way more out of your client than you're using your own paraphrased labels. I want to know how they're describing it. I have my own words to describe that, but how do you say that? Like if they're describing a behavior and I call it a certain way, I usually don't say it until them, unless they cannot find how to describe it. Then I would make a suggestion. But if not, I'd rather pull it out of them than them tell me how they describe it. Way more powerful for the transformation in my observation.
What are some other key component to me when I hear that? That sounds like a masterful grasp of working with someone. What else would you say is some difference between someone who's just learned the method and then someone who is masterful in facilitation with clients?
I would come back to that initial experience I had with the first facilitator that got me through. It's your presence. How present are you with the person in front of you? Can you feel the person as much as hear the person and see the person? I think that is where the masterful ones are different, because I'm very attentive to words, but not just words. I'm attentive to your body language, your micro expressions, and also how my body is reacting to what I'm perceiving of you as an intuitive guidance. Because when I'm really present with you, I'm feeling what you're feeling. And when I'm really present with you, sometimes I start noticing, oh, I have an ache on my right shoulder. And, halfway through the question, they said, I had this weird ache on my right shoulder. And at first, I noticed that, but didn't really pay attention to it until I realized that it was actually a very powerful source of information to help facilitate. When you're present with them, when you have, you have enough rep. When I have enough rep that I don't need to think of the method as I'm being with you, then I'm present with you. And out of that presence, the next question comes out spontaneously. I don't need to question that. That for me is the difference between one who is, I believe, to be masterful, both between those I observe and the ones that are beginning. The ones that are beginning, when the person does not answer your question, like answers off, and I'm sure you've seen that. You're asking this, give me a benefit, and they're telling you, a drawback of something else. That's how do you be present with them and guide them back? Get them to actually answer the question. How do you hold them accountable? And I find that that is through presence.
It's an interesting part of it.
Some facilitators, yep.
Oh,
go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to add to it. There's an interesting part of it because it's something that, for instance, when you're in the method training, John's not specifically saying to you, what you're describing here. He's more focused on here's the method, here's the wording, etc. But it's something that I also found for myself when I came into the breakthrough experience and learning the method is what you're describing and being present with the person. And it was an interesting experience for myself because no one told me to do it directly, but from being in this environment of the breakthrough and this learning, I found myself picking it up at a kind of an unconscious level because it's not something that's instructed consciously. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on how you developed, I don't know if that's the right word, or you brought that into your process with people, because it's not something that's directly, yes, it's in the wording, go to the moment, but you've obviously developed that as you've gone through with your reps. So I'm just curious to hear your process of how that came about for you.
That started much further back. I really started being a little bit conscious of that when I was 14, 15. I was more into esoteric practices at that time, magic and all of that. And presence, like, being focused on a thing, getting in flow was a very important component for a spell or intention to be set and to be sent into the world. That's when I first got, the first premises of doing that. But I only had it conceptually because at that point in time, like I said, I was split, no emotion, I'm not connected to my own emotions. And it was really just brain driven. And through those analysis, I slowly started modeling, like creating a mental model to grasp that part. I had experienced flow before, but never really, labeling it as such. And it was, I would say the biggest piece for me was when I started looking into Taoism and realizing that there's a statement in Taoism in early chapters, which is, the Tao that you can name is not the Tao. That screwed up my mind big time for a long while. I could not fathom what the heck they're talking about. And I consider myself relatively intelligent. I don't know everything, but I can figure things out. one. This paradox here, the Tao that you can name is not the Tao. I just could not, it did not make sense. Until I learned meditation. Where I realized that when I'm being present with something that I do, when I'm in flow, I'm doing it, but I'm not narrating what I'm doing. I'm not talking about it. I just do. There's no question about it. The thing pops up, you do it. And so that got me introduced to that experience of being present with somebody. A second component that contributed to that was when I was taking acting classes. When I was taking acting classes back, I was like 20 years old or something, there was an exercise that you were supposed to sit in front of somebody else and just look into their eyes. About 3 minutes. That's all. And what was surprising is you're sitting there staring into somebody else. You're not allowed to break contact. You have to keep your eye on both of each other. Well, the first part was because you had that eye lock, the body has all these movements that are very uncomfortable. And so, you're like moving around, shaking, like trying, but don't break eye contact. And then at a moment, their faces started distorting, like almost like a haze on top of them, and like new faces started appearing and all of that. And there's like this weird glow that started to appear around them, almost like a halo-like effect around. And I had that experience in my background, but never called it presence. And then one day with a facilitator who coached me through a different process, at one point said, "You're there, you're present." And I was having all these signals, this light, that shake in the body that shifted, like there was a little physical sensation that was quieter, calmer in my own body. And hearing that, I suddenly connected all those dots and all those events to realize that's what presence feels like and looks like. And so now I had that association. So when I'm working with my client, I can see and feel when they're present. In other words, when they're tapping into their prefrontal cortex or when they're in the amygdala. And the way to practice that is a variation of meditation and awareness. So that in the moment, I can be with you. I can notice this, these hazes, these signals, these feelings that are coming in, and recognizing it's part of the engagement I have with you. I'm being present with you. That's why I have these energetic component that comes in, because there's an energetic piece. Now, in the training, John is teaching a skill to not everybody who can do that. That's why he does not go down that route, in my opinion. That's why he words his question so specifically. Like, if you go back to the history of the method, the early questions are a lot simpler. But he went through and added that because he wanted people to get these components and these things. If I tell you to be present, you don't know what to do. For most people, they don't have no clue what to do. But the moment I had experienced that, I connected all the dots. Suddenly that sentence that the Tao that you can name is not a Tao suddenly made sense. Because it was talking about the experience, not the narration, not the labels. The Tao that can be named is a label. It's an arrow. It's a pointer to that experience. Another way to say that is I imagine that you've never tasted a strawberry, ever. I can spend the next 3 hours to describe you the strawberry in all its intricate details and all of that. You still will not have the experience of eating a strawberry. And so I would say sometimes for these type of exercises, and when you're developing presence and all of that, describing it does not help you get it. Experiential exercises to get you to be present and experience that, then we can talk about it. Because now you have the experience. It's like, I remember that one of the method training was sitting next to someone, and that person started asking me very weird questions. And was asking me like, yeah, that open heart thing, what does that feel like? Like, what are you thinking when you're in there? You know, and I was looking at him and said, what do you mean? What does that feel like? No, you've been there, you've experienced it. That's why you're here at a training. And I realized that he did go to the breakthrough, but he did not break through. He did not get the open heart and did not dare say it. So, like, pass through the holes. And when he came here, he was missing the experience that we all have been primed by to know what we're guiding people, through the method for. So any version of meditation can help you get into present. What, for me, the easiest one is I call that the body scan, where for just 1 minute, you're standing, and for 1 minute, 60 seconds, put that on the clock, and just notice your body, how you're breathing, where's your weight, but don't label that, just notice. And then once a minute arrives, you'll notice the Durang couldn't stay concentrated on the body the entire minute. No, sometimes there's a little noise here that you start noticing. A thought, like random thought, comes in, and all of that. But if you do that just 1 minute every day, it becomes quieter, quieter, quieter during, and you're becoming more and more present with your own body. You're experiencing little micro moments of what presence looks like. And when you go from there, if you add a meditative practice of some sort, or simply do the method, because every time you collapse, you enter present. And when you're answering, you're entering presence. Because if not, you can't get the answer. The one that transforms, you're being present. That's why the answer comes. When you're going to the moment, you're being present with it. That's presence. And through repetition, you develop that, you sustain it longer, you can hold it longer, and be aware that you're in that longer. But I agree, it's more of a facilitator trait that John talks about, but doesn't really train us on it at this point in time. Because the training is a training of the method, it's not training these qualities. And I noticed that, when I'm meeting different facilitators, you can feel some facilitators are more present than others. Because you're aware of that. You're aware of that resonance there. And most of the time we don't talk about it because it's a wordless experience. I'm crazy enough, and I studied enough of, Zen literature, meditative literature, to have at least a few words to describe it a little bit, or at least to highlight like how you get there. Like, I can show you the door, but you're gonna have to go through by yourself. I can't walk you there.
This reminds me of all sorts of books that I read before going into the breakthrough experience, but that line of I can show you the door, but you have to go there yourself.
Yeah.
But anyway,
And John did me a very, very beautiful gift, on that first breakthrough on the second day that has been very valuable to me. So Sunday morning, he has that open Q&A question section where you can ask him basically anything. It's going to spontaneously answer that. On that first breakthrough, May 2017, I had asked him 3 questions. And the beautiful gift he offered me is, out of the 3 questions I asked, 2 of them, he said, I don't know. I asked him about the Philosopher's Stone. He said, he answered, the Philosopher's Stone, where were you found it? I said, what? It's an esoteric concept. He said, yeah, where were you found it? And he started to speak about the Planck particles. Okay. And then I asked him a question about a universal law that we have found in the world of IT, which is called Conway's law. And I just wanted to have his opinion on it. Conway law basically states that any system you're creating will take the shape of the communication of those who are creating it. So if you have 3 teams to build your system will be in 3 parts. That's Conway's law. He said he didn't know that, never heard of it. Then okay. And I asked him a question on chaos magic. I wanted to have his opinion because he seems to be very knowledgeable on a lot of things, including esoteric pieces. So I thought, tell me about, chaos magic. It's like a recent esoteric system. What is a thought on? Never heard of it. Then, can you send me a couple books on that? And it was a beautiful gift because I could not hold him so high on the pedestal because of his knowledge, because he could tell me, I don't know. And then, a few times later, I caught some of the information that was incomplete in his awareness, in his knowledge. And it allowed me to realize that, yeah, he does not know it all. He knows a lot, doesn't know everything. Which is very easy, when you consider the span of what he's teaching and talking about, it feels like he knows everything. But he really gave me that gift. It gave me a space for me to discover my version of things. And I do hope that a lot of our facilitators do consider that, working the method on John and working the method on the method itself, so that we don't become completely infatuated with it. Then we can be back to being present and being of service. And intuitively, we'll find out what is the best for you right here, right now.
Jean-Paul, that sounds like some beautiful wisdom to wrap this up. As we're wrapping it up, was there anything further you would like to add to the facilitators listening to this?
I think there is one. I know I heard this before with the others, but I think I'm going to reinforce it as well. If you want to make a living using the method, don't forget that it is a business first. The skill set that you have and your ability to facilitate makes you a professional. It's a profession. In other words, you have a standard. But to make a living out of doing this type of work, there's the business side of it, the business skills, the financial skills, the marketing, the sales. Those are important to develop as well. Knowing the method and being good at the method is not what will, it will give you a service to provide, but it doesn't guarantee that you can make a living out of that if you don't understand the business side of it. if you add the business, learn the marketing, learn the networking and all of that, then you definitely increase your probability to make a living out of it. It's totally possible. You need that part. And I think a lot of expectations, when you step in, you think you can make a living out of it, ignore that side at first, and you can get discouraged. I love the method. I love talking about it. There's a lot of, finite, fine tuning, little distinction in it. And it's amazing to talk about that, to have the opportunity to share. We're but understanding there's a little bit more. And I hope that with that, understanding that these are the skills with which you can then make a living and actually live a good life out of it. Whatever your design is, what is meaningful to you. Remember that there's a business behind it. Learn that. Take the time. It's worth it.
Just on like a sort of semi-personal note, I just finished reading The Red Lion, a fictional esoteric book. Have you heard of that one, Jean-Paul?
No, I haven't ever heard of that one. Tell me about
So
it.
in the 40s, her name's Maria Zeps. I think she's Hungarian. Anyway, she wrote this book, and it's about someone who goes through many lifetimes and through all these initiations and then end up like through pretty much like a Rosicrucian school and all these different lifetimes and stories through deep initiations of the mysteries and the rites and stuff like that. Really, really cool. And so it's fictional to have poetic license, and it's this book on alchemy and a really cool story. So she wrote it in the 40s. Immediately it sold out, and then the government put it on the banned book list, destroyed all copies. Only four survived. And then someone got one of the copies, was hiding it, and rewrote out the entire book, reprinted it, sold it underground, and now we're lucky enough to have it today. So if you're going to get paperback, it's like between 100 and 400 bucks per copy, very limited out there. I found a PDF. And it was an awesome book, like awesome story. So I was just curious to see if you'd read that. Loved it.
No, I haven't read that yet. Email that to me, and I'll add it my to read list. I got like 1,000 books to go through, so still got quite
Yeah.
a few.
Yeah. Well, this one's like more of just like a really awesome page turner. And to be
Yeah,
had a cool experience. In terms of
absolutely. I'll look into that.
esoteric books, what ones do you feel have the most grounding and sort of like balanced wisdom in it?
I find that most of them have an angle towards the balance, but they have their own biases in them. And so I wouldn't say there is one. Like for me, the least biased, I guess it's also the most like abstract. I would probably go for the Tao Te Ching.
Hmm. That you'd put that in the
It is
esoteric
still,
box.
you can use it in an esoteric way. There's the philosophy version of it, and there's the esoteric practices of Taoism as well, where you can cast spells and things like that. I didn't go down that lane for that, but I do know it exists. It's Chinese esotericism.
Yeah, like similar with alongside the I Ching, like the divination of the hexagrams, or completely separate Chinese
Completely
esoteric.
separate. It's an addition. Like the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching are fundamental books in Chinese uh, thoughts. I wouldn't
Yep.
call it a philosophy because that's very Western, but Chinese thoughts. And I Ching really talks about the patterns of transformation. And that's why it's called the Book of Change. It speaks about the dynamic of evolutions and how energy shape shifts through time in a loop. There's a repetition in that. The Tao Te Ching is really a beautiful book that speaks about presence
Mm.
and the varied consequences that goes around presence and how it's applied to different aspects of our lives. That's why I know that there are some schools of thoughts and Chinese sect that would use the Tao Te Ching as a basis for more esoteric practices.
Have you got any experience in that?
In what? In
Casting some Tao Te Ching spells.
no, not the Chinese version of it. When I was younger, I had some experience casting spells using chaos magic because that was kind of my grounding, uh, esoteric discovery. And the thing that I loved about it, because it really matched my mindset, is that in chaos magic, the idea is you're aiming for a goal and a result, and you use whatever belief system that gets you that result. So what it taught me was flexibility. It taught me that what you believe in is malleable. I can choose to be today, use a Catholic Christian viewpoint today because it helps me get this particular goal, and tomorrow completely change that and use a totally different, like a Wiccan belief and using the concept of the book of spells in Wicca and cast a spell using. And so I don't practice that very much anymore, but it really taught me how malleable our belief is.
Mm.
And so that was the time where I was casting spells. I was creating rune-like drawings. We call those sigils. And those sigils were like spells. Intention encompasses that symbols and incentives of the world. And then, you look later on if it came true or not. But it turned out it was just a variation of a manifestation process.
So people are unknowingly casting spells, just like they're unknowingly manifesting things all the time.
Yeah.
It's just a power that they haven't, I
They're not
guess.
aware they're using it
Yeah.
consciously, I mean. Like, if you really push everything that you have right now, positive or negative, is your own creation. Either it's a direct conscious creation, it's an indirect creation because you try to create something that was not following the universal laws. So the laws were uh, balancing you out.
Mm.
But it is still part of your creation.
So could you say that manifestation, how people understand it at the moment, is that it's associated with something I want and I created it, but in fact, you're never not manifesting.
Yeah. It's, if you use the perspective of manifestation, first thing is a lot of people misunderstand manifestation as this idea that if I consciously think about something, I repeat that consciously over and over again, and then poof, it appears. Okay. They miss a couple of steps within that. One is you manifest what you are unconsciously entertaining in your mind, not what you're consciously entertaining in your mind. The part of us that is conscious is like a very tiny fraction of the power of mind. So when you're manifesting, you're trying to manifest something. If you're repeating it constantly over and over and over again, the question is not what you're thinking about. The question that comes is, what is unconsciously tied to that? What is the counter to it? So for instance, I said, okay, I want more money. Well, first, not very specific, so it's not going to help. But let's suppose that it is. Why do you want more money? Well, I want more money so that I'm not poor. So what is the unconscious thought? The unconscious thought is being poor. So what you're drawing into your life is the environment of being poor. Because that unconscious is what you act out on, and through that action, you stay poor. Which is very different to say, I want more money because I have this cause I want to move forward. Yeah, I want more money so I can help orphans in the world get an education and find surrogate parents to take care of them and feel loved in life. That one, there's a higher probability you're actually going to manifest the money that you want. That's the first part of it. The second part that people miss out on manifestation is the action part. There is no change of the outside world that happens without an action. None. There is an indirect or direct action. Someone has to do something at some point. The old joke was, this guy goes to the church every day for the past 10 years. And every day he goes to church and prays to God and said, hey, please help me win, please let me win the lottery this year. Okay. Like, please let me win the lottery. Goes there, very devout, every single day, over and over and over again. And 10 years later, one day, he comes there, does his prayer, and asks, please let me win the lottery. Suddenly, divine light shines, divine being steps in, and God shows up in front of it. I would love to give you the possibility of winning the lottery, but can we at least meet halfway and you buy a ticket? And that's where a lot of manifestation actually is more wishful thinking. Now,
Yeah,
that's, yep.
well, it's like reflecting your values, because if you're not meeting God halfway in this, then you're not doing, it's obviously not a value.
Exactly. And a lot of people, when you're listening to what they claim they want to manifest, it's often more wishful thinking than something that is actually aligned with your highest value, because that's clearly when you're going to do things, you're going to act and do things behind there, and that's going to move forward. That's why I prefer the perspective of creation than the perspective of manifestation, because there's more agency in that. But I noticed that if you use the self-righteous and self-wrongous angle, people who tend to be slightly more self-righteous will talk about creation. Those who are more self-wrongous will talk about manifestation. Manifestation is more passive way of viewing things. The creators tend to be slightly more active.
What's the middle word?
There is no word in the middle.
I wrote down a question to ask earlier, Jean-Paul, if you got a moment for one more, and that was just, what is your vision with the method?
For myself or for us all?
Um, well, both. Well, what's your vision? You've come across this process. Obviously, it resonates deeply with you. What's your vision of where you'd like to take it for yourself and for everyone?
Right here, right now, my deepest being is that of a healer. And the mission that I hold that gets woven in my business coaching, and um, it's taking as many people until the day I die to experience that world beyond morality. That's the mission that I'm on. And this tool, among others, it's not the only one, but it's one of the most complete one that I have, contributes to that. Because when you're in this place beyond morality, when you go and visit it on a regular basis, not, it's not like a location where you can go there and be there for the rest of time. It doesn't work that way. But when you go there on a regular basis, you tap into your inspiration, you tap into the challenges that you want to go after. And it's beautiful to watch when someone lights up and say, this is what I'm here for. And I don't know about you, but I haven't found an easy access to that experience when you're living in a moral world. So for me personally, that is where I'm seeing myself. Now, I'm going to go through that through different forms of it. Whether it is in my teachings that I do on social audio or in my personal work, coaching work with clients. That's what I really want to bring forth and bring life to. Get more people into that space. And I believe that the more people we can get there, the more we can appreciate the transformation of life and breathe life into why we came here to breathe life into. Now, what's the project that we're breathing life into? What's the creation? What's the transformation that we're here to bring? And so that's where I see my vision heading towards, getting more and more people to step into that world. And I believe in the ripple effect. Like, I don't need to affect everybody around the world, directly. But having that selected few that want to go there, yeah, that's what's really inspiring to me.
And just to clarify, when you say beyond morality, you're talking about them aligning with what they really value that inspires them, rather than having an injected value that they're trying to work towards.
It's the angle that I talk about. It's one thing that I find a lot very frustrating for people is, when you're reading a lot of spiritual texts, they talk to you about the end result. They talk to you about the nirvana state, what it is like, but they don't really tell you how to go there. They just say, go there, find your own way and get there. I like the Demartini method because it's more instructive. It actually can tell you something to do to get you closer to that and actually experience that. And often I like to say that for me, I'm more pointing at the door than I am talking about the actual experience of it. And the reason why I do that is because I'm talking to people who live in morality. They think and they believe that things are good and things are bad. That's their world. I'm inviting them out of that. But I can't talk about the other side because I won't get them to walk out. I really believe that people won't listen to you until they feel heard. When they feel heard and understood, then you can guide them anywhere. You can get them to invite them to have that experience. And then that's an anchor. And so for me, in most of my communication, I do talk a little bit about the other side, but most often I like to talk about the door through which you can go to the other side. And that door for me is balance. And it's a recognition of the balance. And I know for a lot of people, when we're talking about balance, it's a static concept, the typical balance that you hold left and right. And it's a static piece, but that's not what balance actually is. It's actually way more dynamic than that. And so for us, I think the place where I tie into John's vision is I am spreading the words, I'm spreading these principles. I'm pointing back to him so that people can experience that and know that it exists. And I think, each facilitator is through our way of communicating, our communities that we build, and how some of us, tie it and build full business around the method itself, and some weave that into other things as well. It's bringing these principles to life and bringing it into the world. I mean, no, there is I feel both honored and privileged to have gained access to that. To have found, this model here. I de-infatuated myself from the method and saying this is the only way, to realize that, well, that's more than one way. But then when you strip down the method to the principles underlying it, you find that a lot of all the other healing modalities are using the same principles. They just found a different way to express it. But I still find this one the most complete because it's the only one that can signal that there is an end. And the more we can bring that out to people, to experience that and to know that there is an alternative. If you choose to go there, we can help you. I think the ripple effect is magnificent. It'll create its own chaos for sure. But that's what is inspiring, that we're not alone in bringing this message that you are perfect the way you are. So that's how I see that vision for us all. Each in our own unique way, our own idiosyncrasy, our own understanding of the method. But we share that common desire to transform people and to help people transform. I like to say it, one person at a time. That's why I love what you do. You know, you're adding that value of creating this space for facilitators to come, practice, learn, grow.
Well, thanks for your time today, Jean-Paul. You've been very generous, and thanks for coming on. Any final words you want to add in, or any final questions, Dom, before we finish up?
Don't open that can of worms up. I'll maybe another time.
Okay. Thanks, Jean-Paul.
Thank you both. It was fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.